Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is... So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is usually the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. But May is Mod Month. For the entire month of May, I've only been covering albums from the past 20 years. You'd be surprised just how many connections these albums have to the stuff that I usually cover. Last week was part 2 of Mod Month, the 10th anniversary of Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. If you need to catch up, but 20-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here on my channel and over on my Instagram. Diverting away from the whole modern albums thing for a moment to announce the Beach Boys fan crossover of the century, I crashed Giggins' Smile Sessions series. We talk the Smile Sessions, Beach Boys lore, the state of music in 1967. I somehow didn't mention Our Prayer at all, which is amazing considering it's the foundation of the oldest joke on my channel. It was a lot of fun going on a little choose your own adventure through Beach Boys history with Giggins. Thank you so much for having me on. That video will be linked in my description. Taking another hard left turn to this week's album, Cavalcade by Black Midi. It's the Black Midi episode. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post the hints to next week's album, or albums. Really quick before I take the plastic off, you'll notice that my hype sticker is vertical, and that's because this is a vertical folding gatefold. I might accidentally hold this jacket sideways a couple times in this video, so many apologies to the album artist if I do. It's an easy mistake to make. Let's take the plastic off. If this by chance is your first time here, let me tell you, man, you picked one hell of a week! So my copy is a reissue. I got this from good old Newbury Comics. If I'm gonna be buying a new or new-ish release, it's probably gonna be from them. This album art design was by David Rudnick. Opening up the gatefold to show you the liner notes and lyrics. I have no idea what this art is supposed to be, but whatever it is, it fits the music perfectly. Alright, so one of Black Midi's hallmarks is having an ungodly amount of instruments on their albums, so buckle up as we run through this personnel. Kicking things off with the core lineup of the band, we have Jordy Greep on vocals, guitar, steel guitar, piano, accordion, Hammond organ, and many, many synths. Name a synth, Jordy probably uses it. We have Cameron Picton on bass, lead vocals on slow and diamond stuff, upright bass, lute, flute, and a couple different fretless instruments, and Morgan Simpson on drums and various percussion. We have the touring members of this band tapping in on sax and piano/keys. Cavalcade was produced by Spud Murphy with Black Midi. Special guests include Blossom Calderoni on cello, Rosie Alina doing guest vocals on diamond stuff, and unnamed helicopter pilot playing the helicopter? Roll transition! Alright, so before we get to that, let's start things off with a brief recap of the first Black Midi record, 2019, Schlagenheim. I'm not really focusing on Schlagenheim in this video because it's just so different to the iteration of Black Midi that I'm focusing on today. But it's a very important starting point for the band. One of the moments that really put Black Midi on the map was a KEXP set they did during this album cycle. They played an alternate KEXP venue in Iceland and totally blew the roof off the place. Take all the expectations you have of a cutesy, quaint little KEXP set, and Black Midi tore them all to shreds. The Schlagenheim writing and recording process was very improvisational, and this is pretty much the opposite to what we get on Cavalcade. As cool as Schlagenheim is, the band had changed pretty radically since making it. For one, they wanted to challenge themselves by writing more complex material. And secondly, when this record was released, there were two guitarists in the band. In between Schlagenheim and the following record, Matt takes a step back from the band. He's still credited as a writer here on Cavalcade, even though he'd stepped away from his duties in the band. The guys still kept him involved, and I think that was super cool of them to do. With this new iteration of the group, Black Midi is ready to start making Cavalcade until March 2020 happens. This puts a wrench in everything. It slightly delays production, but now the guys are really required to form a clear and concise vision of what they want to do because they can't jam like at all. Nevertheless, Cavalcade was recorded in the height of the at Pony Studio and Hoxa HQ in London, as well as Hellfire Studio in Dublin. So remember when I said there was a helicopter on this thing? John L. was the promo single of this record. It was the only song not recorded during the Cavalcade sessions. They have a different producer for it, different location, everything. During one take, a helicopter happened to fly over the studio. It was a great take otherwise, nobody wanted to trash it, so they just left it in, and that's the take we hear on the album. This kind of reminds me of when MC5 played along with the police helicopters flying over their heads when they played the '68 DNC riots, but enough about the band that inevitably gets brought up literally whenever I have the excuse to. The track listing for Cavalcade goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have John L, and this song actually has an alternate opening on the vinyl version. Next, we have Marlene Dietrich, followed by, oh god, I don't know how I'm ever going to pronounce this, Chondrolamacia patella. That is the only attempt I'm making. Followed by Slow, and side 1 is closed with Diamond Stuff. Opening up side 2, we have Dethroned, followed by Hogwash and Balderdash, and the album closes with Ascending Forth. A few more notes before we get to the honest-to-goodness release of Cavalcade. The record was finally announced in March of 2021. The guys held off on releasing this in hope that the would calm down. It did not, so they just said, fuck it, we're gonna release the record anyway. Upon announcing Cavalcade, the band hosts an open poll on their website for songs they should cover for a flexi disc accompanying the pre-order releases. My release doesn't have this since I got a reissue. And the winners were, drumroll please, 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson, Moonlight on Vermont by Captain Beefheart, and depending on where you ordered your album from, either Nothing Compares to You by Prince or Love Story by Taylor Swift? Swifties stay winning! Cavalcade and its accompanying Caval Covers single were finally released May 28th, 2021, 11 months after production began. This doesn't seem like a huge gap to you, but believe me, for this band, it is. To work around the FFMM very much still happening, the band does another set for KEXP, but socially distanced. They broadcast it from another alternate venue in London. This one was incendiary. They brought a brass section with them. It's just mind-blowing stuff. They played material from Cavalcade, of course, but they also played some new stuff. Plot twist, bitches! This is a double episode! Alright, so this week's episode was originally supposed to just be Cavalcade, but as my research for this week's episode went on, I realized, one, The release of Cavalcade almost perfectly aligns with the beginning of Hellfire production, so too, I really have to talk about Hellfire, don't I? So, let's talk about Hellfire. If you thought Cavalcade had a lot going on personnel-wise, then buckle up. There are over 70 people credited on Hellfire. Still not as many as the 100 people playing on Random Access Memories last week, but whatever. It's still a lot. But get this! Over half of the people credited on Hellfire are credited for burps. We have the usual suspects. Jordy's still on vocals, guitar, accordion, steel guitar, but we add various whistles to the mix. Cameron on bass, vocals on Eat Men, Eat and Still. He adds in synths, classical guitar, harmonica, and various sound effects, with Morgan Simpson on drums and various percussion. We have the touring members back on this record. Hellfire was produced by Marta Sologny. She was the producer of John L. on this record, along with Max Goulding. Just like the Schlagenheim and Cavalcade processes were pretty much opposites, so were the processes of Cavalcade and Hellfire. Hellfire was written entirely in isolation, so across Black Midi's discography so far, we've covered the entire spectrum of jamming versus independent composition and collaboration versus isolation. It's worth noting that around this time, Jordy starts doing this early 60s but also David Byrne thing with his clothes, and it's super cool. I love a musician that doesn't look anything like the music they make. The band returns to Hoxa HQ in London to record Hellfire from June through August of 2021. For those of you keeping track at home, that means Cavalcade wasn't even out for a month before they decided to start working on the next record. After ironing out all of these timelines, I'm pretty sure the only reason Black Midi doesn't release back to back to back to back is because they have to wait for their physical releases to catch up. Anyway, the track listing for Hellfire goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Hellfire, followed by Sugar Zoo. Then Eat Men Eat, followed by Welcome to Hell, and side 1 closes with Still. Opening up side 2, we have The Race is About to Begin, followed by Dangerous Liaisons, then The Defense, and the album closes with 27 questions. Hellfire was released July 15th, 2022. Again, the only reason I think this took so long was because they had to wait for the pressing plants to catch up. It's their highest charting record upon release, blah blah blah, but what I really want to talk about with this release is the heatwave stunt. So Hellfire's release just so happened to be during one of the worst heat waves the UK has ever experienced. On the hottest day of the year, Black Midi drives a Hellfire-themed ice cream truck around London selling ice creams, t-shirts, and copies of Hellfire. Number 1, I could not stop laughing when I learned this. Number 2, I love that they did this. And number 3, Jordy wore his full suit the entire time. You gotta appreciate someone that stays committed to the bit even when it's over 100 degrees outside. So, considering all of this, what do I think? Right, so since there are now 2 albums at play, and I've never done this in a Vinyl Monday episode before, I'm not gonna do the track-by-track breakdown that I usually do. Instead, I'm gonna use moments from both of these albums to illustrate my broader thoughts and feelings about Black Midi. Now, I was introduced to Black Midi through their KEXP sets, and I was hooked. It also certainly helps that Wayne Kramer follows them on Instagram. Listen, if a band gets the Brother Wayne stamp of approval, I'm probably gonna like them. Case in point, Zen Gorilla. After seeing those Black Midi sets, I decided I had to have them on the series somehow. I bought the studio albums, and I saved diving into them until it was time to make this video. My first reaction to Black Midi in the studio was... what the fuck? Okay, so for starters, Black Midi makes some dense music. This stuff is pretty far out. It's all very technical, and that's gonna be a little much for some people. Do you have any idea how rare it is that I'm not just surprised, I am taken aback by the stuff I hear on a record? Spoiler alert, it's very rare. Prog, jazz, any super technical music like this is gonna be tough for me to cover because I'm not a musician myself. That's one of my blind spots. All I can really do is listen to John L. and Sugar and be baffled that real human people are somehow playing these instruments. All of these guys are incredible players. Cameron doesn't get as much attention because, well, the bass is really easy to lose in this onslaught of stuff. I like to say that a band is only as good as their drummer, and Morgan is on a level that I seldom see on this series. The interesting thing about this band is that, on one hand, you have Morgan, who can play pretty much anything, and then you have someone like Jordy in this band too, who I honestly can't picture in any other band but Black Midi. They both make Black Midi what it is for two totally different reasons. It was a challenge listening to both of these albums in 1 week. Listening to Black Midi is one thing, but truly taking it in, absorbing everything that's going on is something else entirely. It can be tiring. Black Midi is like if Forced Latitudes by the Doors was a band. Huge up to Black Midi's producers for the work that they did. I think my head might explode if I had to do all of this. Also, huge ups to Black Midi for having so much trust in their producers. As I fought through Cavalcade and Hellfire, and believe me, these records put up a fight, I began to see them as sister albums. They both have the same sense of drama, theatricality, like Arthur Brown or maybe Alice Cooper. So across both of these albums, how would I describe the enigma that is Black Midi? I think the best approximation I can make is somewhere in the middle of Crazy World of Arthur Brown and Lark's Tongues era King Crimson. That Lark's Tongues connection has a particular hinge on how I consume Black Midi because I was challenged by this album too. It took me a solid year to get this era of King Crimson, and sometimes I still lose it. Alright, into the records themselves. I loved Cavalcade. I really enjoyed this album. It was really cool listening to this one and recognizing songs from the KEXP set. I like John L. for all of the reasons I like prog. This song feels like I'm Dante journeying through the Inferno. Like, what time sig even is this? This song is a hyper-concentrate of all of the controlled chaos that Black Midi is known for. Another quintessentially Black Midi moment on this record is the transition from John L. to Marlene Dietrich. Jarring, kind of hilarious, no notes. Moments like Marlena are where Jordy's breadth as a vocalist really gets to shine. He has one of the most peculiar voices I've ever heard. Peculiar is the perfect word to describe it, and no, it's not a bad word. His voice is part dramatic actor, part 1940s radio host, and his accent is entirely untraceable. Like, it's clearly British somehow, but it's also a transatlantic accent. This guy watches a lot of vintage international film, and you can tell. There's this moment in Patella where my jaw just dropped first hearing it. This switch up is a holy shit moment, and it's one of the things I love most about prog. You never truly know where the song is going to end from where the song is going to start. As many amazing moments as there are, the album version of Dethroned leaves a lot to be desired. There are some groups who just cannot fully harness their live energy into a studio setting. The MC5 had this problem. See the big stumble they took between Kick Out the Jams and Back in the USA. Black Midi is one of those groups. You have not experienced Black Midi until you've seen a live set. After how face-melting, intense, and almost beautiful KEXP Dethroned was, I was underwhelmed by the album version. There are some prog cliches popping up on this thing. Did Ascending Fourth really have to be like 10 minutes long? I don't think so, but it didn't affect my overall enjoyment of this record. I really liked every single song on it. As much as I enjoyed Cavalcade, I admit I struggled with Hellfire. I was slow to warm up to this one, and I still haven't warmed up to it quite the way I did with Cavalcade. Hellfire has a fantastic opener, though. It's a fantastic statement of intent. I can listen to it and say, yes, this minute and a half explains all of what Hellfire is about. With this record, they kind of threw everything out the wall to see what sticks. I'm not kidding. Everything. There is a little bit of everything on this record. There's prog, avant-jazz, noise, exotica, folk, psych, there's flamenco. On Eat Men Eat, the end of Sugar does a jungle thing. When you listen to a record like this, it's obvious that the band consumes a lot of different music. This album is cool and I recognize that, but songs like Still go on just a little bit too long. Their album pacing gets screwy, and when you've got music as complex as what you're working with here, a wonky pacing can be your Achilles heel. But this record improves upon Cavalcade's biggest blind spot, the songwriting. Cavalcade was a huge sonic leap forward for the band, and Hellfire rings in their songwriting coming of age. They're getting a lot less abstract and a lot more narrative, and I like this approach for prog. We're talking insane scenarios like a ship crew tripping absolute sacks after eating some bad food, a hitman stalking his target, and the coolest moment on Hellfire, the song 27 Questions. This is about a World War II soldier who knows he's about to die. There's still something I feel that is lacking within Black Midi, and that's the use of Cameron's talent. His vocals on Schlagenheim are some of that record's best moments. I had no idea that Schlagenheim would be so relevant to this video. I guess I have to go back out and buy that tomorrow. Cameron gets a little lost in the fray on Cavalcade, and he gets a little lost on Hellfire too. This new, less punk Black Midi still has yet to find a place for him. I feel like with one more studio album, he'll finally hit his stride within this iteration of the band. One of my favorite things about Black Midi is their sense of humor. They're serious about what they do, but they don't take themselves too seriously at all. Think the key smashing in John L., the jarring transitions, the electric slide whistle at the end of Patella. There are some totally absurd moments on Hellfire, so much so that you can't help but laugh. See Geordie's auctioneer thing. It's the only way I can describe it. I mean, hello, this is the group that interrupted their interview with Fantano to play ZZ Top so loud that they blew out the mic. Then they turned the entire interview on its head by interviewing Fantano. And remember that radio-esque note that I made about Geordie's voice? Yeah, Well, you'll be glad to know that Hellfire does a fucking radio bumper interlude. The band is in on the joke! At first, I was dumbfounded to hear that this is a band full of Zoomers. These guys are playing way too well to be my age. But then I considered the Taylor Swift cover, interrupting the Fantano interview, the ice cream truck, and, like, of course this band is full of Zoomers. That is peak Zoomer humor. Brief segue to talk about Caval covers. The 21st Century Schizoid Man cover is unreasonably good. We can't let Robert Fripp find out about this. You know, Fripp once said something like, if prog wants to survive, it has to stop pretending it's 1970. Forgive me if I got that quote wrong, it's been a while. There is no pretending with Black Midi. There's no attempting to keep any retro vibe that existed within prog 50 years ago. Their stuff is so forward-thinking, it's baffling. Overall, I am eternally fascinated, baffled, taken aback, entertained, and pushed to my extremes by this group. And I can't wait to see where this thing is gonna go. If Black Midi is the future of prog, I'm optimistic. My personal favorites on Cavalcade are John L., Marlene Dietrich, Patella, Dethroned, and Hogwash and Balderdash. And my favorites on Hellfire are Sugar Zoo, Eat Men Eat, Welcome to Hell, and 27 Questions. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Monday albums, I have a Vinyl Monday Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. Whew! And that is it! That is the Black Midi episode. What do you think of these albums? What do you think of Black Midi as a whole? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about the albums I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Actually, you're gonna see me before that because the 1-year anniversary of me being on YouTube is on Thursday. So actually, I'll see you on Thursday, and I'll see you next week for the final part of Mod Month. Okay, bye.